Hello, I don't know how to pronounce your name correctly. Frokupse. Kindly make me the meeting host. Yeah, and to everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. For those who it's the first time here, welcome. To everyone else, welcome once again to the third session of the Jessup information session. I hope the last 2 days have been very informative for you as it has been for me. And today will be our last day. So, as I had mentioned, today we'll be discussing on how to research or generally plan your research in international law. And then I'll also lead you on a discussion on navigating the ILSA resources, that's the International Law Students Association website and other resources. And in between, we'll have a Judge Jeffrey Robbins who will join us and engage you with the questions you had asked. And hopefully you'll ask more questions. Yeah, kindly ask more questions and keep the session engaging. So, okay. Just Yeah, so just a minute, let me fix the sharing and hosting issues, and then we can start. Okay, thank you. Um, First of all, kindly confirm you can hear me and confirm that you can see my slides.
On the move, iş sıralamama WhatsApp haybeli. Delicioso. Tos motor que te fue.
Okay. Okay, so I'll start. Yeah, so over the past few days, we've had discussions on various topics. Now, specific on the preparation for the Jessup competition, you've talked about preparing for the oral rounds of the competition, talked about preparing for the written rounds of the competition. We've also discussed how to analyze the compromise or the statement of facts, which is the main and the primary thing you should do, yeah, before you start researching, because you cannot research really without context or knowing what you're researching. Yeah. So as most of you are aware at this point, you know that a dispute is usually a disagreement on law. And you'll note that most Jessup questions usually is a dispute on the law. Yeah. And that's why, as you saw from the previous presentations, the facilitators talking about, you will use the same exact law to push your arguments as an applicant and also to push your arguments as a respondent. Um, the good thing about um, the good thing about Jessup notes is that you get to interact with modern issues, the most recent issues in the international law sphere. And it's not usually dead set laws, let's say, something that has been agreed on and has already been confirmed in international law. Yeah. It is usually questions that have garnered debate, discussion, um, or even dispute. Yeah, there are a lot of scholars are disagreeing on these areas of law, and the Jessup competition allows you now as a student to participate. That's why you find in some of the rounds, the winner of the competition, the document can also be published because it is part of legal research. Yeah. So remember as you're doing the Jessup competition, now as you do the 2026 Jessup competition, you'll be expected to become experts in the field of law you're researching on, because you will be doing in-depth research. Yeah, not just a shallow research. You'll be doing in-depth research, and you'll be expected to know of every aspect of the specific topic you're presenting or discussing before the bench. Yeah. So remember, as I guide you through this, how to research or how to work, and every instructions we have given is not really set on stone. What we got to share is our experience in the Jessup competition, and hopefully our experience will inspire you to get your own style, and yeah, and to prepare effectively for the competition. So what we're doing today and for the previous day is just guiding you with the hopes that you will find your own niche as you prepare for the competition. Yeah. So okay, just a minute. The view is blocking my screen. Yeah. So since we've talked a lot about research and everything, I won't go into depth on everything. So I'll just be highlighting a few things as I proceed. Yeah. So the first thing I'll be talking about is using IRAC. IRAC, we've discussed it intensively while discussing the memorial round preparations and the oral rounds preparation. Yeah. So that is addressing the issue, addressing the rule, analysis, and conclusion. And remember, this is a commonly accepted framework that um, is easy. It's easy to follow. Yeah. It's easy to follow whether you're reading the document or whether you're submitting the same. It helps create a roadmap of what you're arguing. So in the instance when you're preparing your research, yeah, uh, remember you're supposed to keep writing as you proceed. I know for most people, while they're preparing for the oral rounds, they even create scripts, which is what worked for me. So we will write down a script. And sometimes you might find yourself in a situation where you perhaps have the factual arguments ready. So part of the analysis is already ready, but you haven't sufficiently addressed the rule. You still need to do more work on the rule. So remember, time is also of essence, because you only have till right now. And for example, for the memorials, till January to prepare for the same. So every time you get a new idea, every time you get any information, so long as it's on IRAC, write it down. Yeah, write it down. Um, Sometimes, though rarely, I haven't seen it in the Jessup competition. I've seen it in the Nuremberg competition, if any of you might be interested in it in the future. Um, there are instances where you'll only need to make factual arguments because there is almost no law supporting you on the same at the moment, but it will still be correct because you'll still be arguing based on the general principles on international law, which in most cases is on equity. So feel what you can. Fill in what you can. You can use bookmarks or comments to help you indicate that I'm yet to address the rule section of this argument, or I'm yet to fully analyze.
Now what pencil is this? This.
Okay. Or I'm yet to finalize on what I want my issue to state. Yeah. So write. And every time you find something, write it down. And also it helps clear your brain, and you know what needs more research and what you might need to spend less time on, especially as the deadline is nearer and nearer. Yeah. So next, and one of the main things is you need to understand public international law. So I'm speaking about this on the basis that some of you while applying shared that this might be your first time mooting, and some of you also just a minute, yeah, some of you shared that this might be your first time mooting, and okay. Sorry for that. Yeah, so some of you shared that this might be your first time mooting, or you're yet to undergo a course on public international law in your institution. Yeah. So the Jessup moot is generally on public international law. So you'll have to understand about the personalities in law. You'll have to understand about jurisdiction. You'll have to understand the various terms that exist. When someone tells you about the hus cogens, they tell you about customary law, the state practice, the opinion juris, when they mention lex specialis, lex generalis. There are a lot of terms that exist in public international law, and there's a lot of knowledge you need to gain in public international law before you can proceed to the competition. Yeah. There are questions that Salome was talking about yesterday. The understanding of jurisdiction, the understanding of admissibility, the understanding of local standard in international law. By addressing that, or by studying public international law, you'll be able to have a basis of what you're discussing. And usually, especially in preliminary rounds, you'll find judges asking questions on such matters. So if you don't know, even if you've built your whole argument on the specific area of law you're handling, you might reduce your credibility before the judge, because how do you expect you to be an expert yet you don't know what public international law speaks? Yeah. And also in the process of research, this is something Daniela talked about yesterday. Avoid heavy legalese. Yeah. If there is an existing English term for the word, yeah, use it. And remember, especially when you go to the international rounds, you're not only going to meet students who English is their first language. Yeah. You're going to meet people who English is their second or their third language. So remember, you're also supposed to be well understood, not only by the judges, but also by the other team. Yeah, because if you frustrate them, it might also backfire on you. So remember, use the English term where necessary, but also make sure you use the appropriate term. Yeah, don't also oversimplify the document. But the main thing, as I said, make sure you have an understanding of public international law. Yesterday, we were able to handle one of the topics. So that was on state responsibility, yeah, which is crucial while especially when establishing liability for cases before the international court. Yeah, if the state is not liable, you really cannot take them to court for the same, because their rebuttal will be, we are not liable for the case at hand. Yeah. Okay, so the next thing, after understanding public international law, you need to understand the basics of the specific niche topics of the moot. Yeah. So here I have put the 4 topics that were released earlier this year. So these are the 4 topics that Jessup intends you will be interacting with in the course of the competition. So number 1, who has the right to intervene before the proceedings of the International Court of Justice? You'll notice that one of the parties, Solania, if you've read the facts, wants to intervene in the court case. Yeah, in the court case. So you will need to know who has the right to intervene. So that also helps you plan your research. Look into the basics of it. What does the law talk about it? What have scholars talked about it? I know it's a lot, but it is rewarding every time you compile the document and every time you present, because information that you gain with time will always be beneficial at some point. Yeah. The next question is, what are the rights of indigenous people relating to rare earth minerals found in their land? What are the general principles of law recognized by civilized nations? And finally, sorry, when is a state immune from the domestic jurisdiction of another state when it has caused economic harm to citizens of that state? Yeah. So it's your duty as a participant to research on these topics and have a basic understanding of this area of law, even as you proceed with your research, on the moot question. Yeah. So as I said, sadly, the Jessup rules do not allow us to discuss the topics after they've been released, so we cannot discuss them. And there's also rules, limiting how much the trainers can assist you in the competition. But I always advise every student, remember, this is still a learning process for every student. Don't be afraid to ask. Yeah. I believe you have lecturers in your field. As you've been told, there's a lot of JSFers around who are always willing to support as you prepare for the competition. Just ask. Yeah, you've done this research and maybe you've gotten to a point where you don't understand, or you need clarification, or you need resources that will help you move ahead. Always ask for help. Yeah, it's not a solo man or a solo team activity. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So while researching international law, so this is just brief. Remember, it's important to understand where you're getting the resources of international law. I believe the main document you'll be relying on is the treaties and the conventions, obviously. And sometimes you'll need to find case laws. So you'll be using the ICJ cases, you'll be using the regional court cases, yeah, the ACT, the African court, you might need even tribunals, yeah, to persuade your case. So remember, all these cases exist on their website. Don't be shy to research, yeah. Research, read the documents. As you're told, as you have been told on the previous days, you need to read the decision, you need to read the dissenting opinions, you need to even read the submissions by the applicants and the respondent in the case, which is beneficial in helping you shape your arguments as you proceed. Yeah, sometimes you might hit a jackpot while reading the submissions. Yeah, that help you in researching your document. So also make sure that the resources you're using are reliable. Yeah, don't just click on any link you find on the internet. Yeah, so there's obviously the guiding Article 38 of the ICJ statute. Remember, it's not exhaustive. This is the traditional sources of international law, so the treaties and conventions. Make sure you know what this treaty is, what treaty you're relying on. Obviously, the sections or the articles you'll be relying on. make sure you also, especially for the specific argument you're relying on, make sure you also know the preparatory works that came towards the making of this treaty. Yeah. Why? Because sometimes that is what you might need to support or maybe negate. And it's also a good tool while rebutting arguments, because someone might strongly rely on a certain law, and the main rebuttal you have is that the preparatory works for this treaty aimed at doing something and is perhaps not in line with what is in the facts at the moment. Therefore, the law cannot be applied. Yeah, so it depends. Mooting is an art. You can style it at your own way. Yeah. I'm talking about international customs. Yeah, customs is a very wide area of law to discuss. Yeah, because you have to show state practice, you have to show opinion juris while presenting it before the court. So remember, you'll research and you'll have to even research on what countries have done to establish this state practice, yeah, and what establishes the opinion juris in the matter. General principles of law, I won't touch on that. Judicial decisions, remember, all judicial decisions before the courts are persuasive, yeah. And obviously, there is more weight, or you won't attract many questions on the technicality when you rely on international law cases. So not international courts and international tribunal cases, and regional courts and regional tribunal cases, yeah. But sometimes, and to some extent, especially from how I've seen this question being drafted, you will need to rely on national decisions. You will even need to rely on sometimes arbitration awards in some situations. I don't know if that will be used this time. Yeah, but it depends. Yeah. Remember, while you're using a case law, for example, you're using a national case law, why are you using it as a case law? How is it contributing to the sources of law? Yeah, that might be one of the questions you're asked. Are you trying to establish state practice? Are you trying to establish the general practice? Yeah, just interpreting the treaty, and also how persuasive is it before the court? So as you use anything, every research can count, but make sure you also understand the workings behind it. I am using this case because of this and this. Yeah. So the other importance as to why we talk about reading the case laws intensively. Sometimes remember, the judges who are coming to judge this competition most likely are also in the international law practice. So they have read these decisions most likely, and they have an understanding of the spirit of the case. Yeah. So they can even refer you to the facts of the issue, and seek your comments, yeah, or seek your comments or seek your arguments on why the facts of the compromise should rely, why the facts or your arguments should rely on this case law, yet the facts are maybe slightly different or maybe slightly similar. Depends with how you're arguing the case. So as I said, you will need to read extensively. Don't be shy of reading. You will need to read extensively. And for some documents, let's say the most common one is the Tadic case. Yeah, there is a lot of documents that came after the decision was made, or the Nicaraguan versus USA case. A lot of documents came after the decision was made. Yeah, the judges have read these documents and will raise those questions to you. They will even this person wrote this document explaining this and this and this and this. Why should I rely on your argument? Yeah, yet there are modern approaches to the decision that was made in the 1900s, and you will need to support your argument. You see, so you don't just read the ruling of the case and stop there. Research. Yeah. So the other source, the writing of publicists. So the books you'll be relying on. The main books the main publishing, so the scholarly articles you'll be relying on will be shared by Jessup. So Jessup usually shares 2 batches. I don't know whether they'll do the same this year. They usually share 2 batches for research. Yeah, the first one contains mainly the treatise and the court decisions you'll rely on, and the second one mainly has the scholarly articles you'll be relying on. Research them. Um, um, as you're researching as you're researching into them, look at the references in the documents. Yeah, sometimes the references can guide you to a document that will support your argument. That is part of smart research. And as I'm speaking, you'll note that this is a lot of process. So you have to start as soon as now to research on all that. Yeah. And as much as I'm saying that, as even though it's a lot of work, it is also exciting because you yourself, you'll find yourself being an expert in this area of law that you wouldn't have been aware of before. Yeah. So you need to research, and you need to research extensively. So there are other sources that you also need to rely on. Some of them, yes, are usually shared in the batches, but you're not limited to what the batch has, to the batch that has been shared. You can always rely on more and more documents so long as they accurately support the research you've made. So from the advice we've had previously, it's smarter to rely on the batch. Don't ignore the batch that has been submitted, because the reason why they've been submitted is the panel has considered these documents the most important documents to guide you on what major arguments they plan to listen to during the competition. Yeah. So if you don't read these documents, let's say, for example, you receive, okay, Nicaragua versus USA case is the one commonly in my head. Yeah. You receive the case Nicaragua versus USA, and you're submitting before the bench, and perhaps you rely on a different case that accurately makes the argument you plan to present. Yeah. But remember, the judge also receives a bench memorandum with all these resources that have been shared with you. So the judge might direct you back to the Nicaragua versus USA case and tell you that there was this decision. Do you know about it? And all that. Yeah. And there are judges who are lenient enough to let it go, but there are also judges who might not let it slide. Yeah. So just go through the batch of resources that has been sent by Jessup. Yeah. So the other documents we're talking about here, we're talking about the general decisions, declarations, resolutions, and other UN and international body documents. This one's obviously interpret the treaty. Yeah, they usually interpret the treaty law, or sometimes contribute to depending on how you want to argue your case. Yeah, so also look into them. They help you establish the structure of your argument. Yeah, as I had mentioned, preparatory documents of treaties, you need to review them and see what were the authors of this treaty considering when they drafted the document. Yeah, you need to look at draft articles and articles existing, especially from the ILC. Any argument that you might need, yeah, for the case might be in the article, so might be argued in the same. Yeah, so there's dissenting opinions and draft submissions. I think I've already talked about that. And tell you about one of the questions I had during my Jessup rounds. I remember my teammate was even asked. I remember one of the documents we're relying on was the Siracusa Principles, and the judge asked her who drafted the Siracusa Principles, and the judge also asked her who are the members like can you list these people who drafted the Siracusa principles. I'm not saying that the questions are usually that extreme, but sometimes you need to know all that, yeah? Because knowing who drafted the Siracusa principles was part of establishing what was the spirit of the Siracusa principles. So that was my experience. To get more experience or to understand how the questions are usually formatted, Jessup shares videos of oral rounds of the competition. So you can look into it and see the nature of the questions that the students were asked in the course of their submissions to help you structure your research. Yeah. I know the oral rounds are like way ahead, but you are starting your research right now and you'll need the context as soon as now to be able to understand what kind of questions am I anticipating. Yeah. So there are secondary sources. I think we talked about them. The research papers, the articles. So especially when you don't know where to start with your research, sometimes there's someone who has written a paper on the topic you're looking for. The documents are good to help you establish your argument. You can also use the references and the citations to guide you to more credible legal documents you can rely on. We also have legislations for intergovernmental organizations, national decisions. Sometimes the best decision is to just Google. Yeah. Especially with the development of what is it called in the age of AI and browsing history and everything else. The moment you keep Googling the same things in your search engine, your search engine also tailors the information it gives you in the process. So sometimes you just need to Google. And in other cases, remember you're still a student in the process of this competition. Consult your lecturers, consult your colleagues who might be more well versed with what you're researching on. Yeah, and that they might have something that will help you proceed with the competition. Okay. Yeah. So the Jessup has sponsors. Yeah. Sorry. The Jessup has sponsors, so research sponsors. And for most of these websites, so I've started with the Husmundi here. For most of these websites, you know that you need to pay for them before you can use them. Yeah. And I don't know, for those who have registered, I don't know if you've received the information about it at the moment. Usually when a student registers and pays the subscription, and pays the registration fees of the competition, yeah, Jessup gives you information on the database or the research engines that have partnered with the Jessup for the competition and gives you the logins for the competition. Yeah. So utilize them. Yeah, utilize them. And also especially for Husmundi. Yeah, especially for Husmundi. I know that they give trainings to the students. Yeah. So you are trained on how to use the research engine before you get access to the Husmundi. So you need to register in time also for the competition so that you can get the training. The other links are usually given to you, the access links, and use them, research into them. Yeah. Make sure you use them to build on your case. Yeah, because it's a whole resource that you might not find anywhere else. Yeah. So we have the Husmundi, which you can use to find relevant legal resources and international case laws. And you can always set your filters in Husmundi to be able to alert you even when new documents are submitted to the website. And you can use it to save documents that you might need for further research. Yeah. So so I've mentioned the Husmundi. So for international law research, it relies on AI and has a user-friendly interface to help you customize your research depending on what you're planning to research. Okay, so next we have the Oxford University Press. Yeah, believe most of you are familiar with it. So most scholarly articles can be found here. So if you need to research into scholarly articles, make sure you use the resource. We also have the LexisNexis, yeah, which is also a powerful research engine, and you also have Hein Online. So take advantage of the links. Most of the time, especially when people register for the competition, they don't read the whole email they receive, yeah, because it's usually a prompted email that you receive afterwards. Go through the email and you'll get the links. If you don't have the links, you need to request them from Michael as soon as possible, because you're always informed. Yeah, you're given the links and you can use it in the process of your research during the competition. So yeah, that is what I had. That's what I had today. Research is extensive. As I said, you're not merely researching for an exam here. Yeah, you're not really researching for an exam here. You're researching to actually attain the level of an expert in this area of law you're working on. So make time for it. That's one thing. Make time for it. Make time for your teammates. Yeah. Research on the topics you're handling intensively. And it's not just reading the document and stopping from there. Understand the spirit, understand what was the reason why this law exists as is. Yeah. As I said, Jessup handles issues that are still in discussion. Yeah, they're not like finalized areas of law, which makes it also an interesting competition, because you won't find yourself in a situation where you are making an argument against something that is completely impossible. Yeah, it's something that is questionable. It's an area of law that there are arguments on this side, there are arguments on this side, and you as students are being invited to make arguments on the same. And as I said, enjoy it. Yeah, you will feel the pressure at some point. That is very normal. Every single person doing the competition in any of the country is feeling the same research. Yeah. In the process of research, be comfortable and always be ready to restructure your arguments. Not necessarily, you won't start the same arguments and end with the same arguments, especially till the international rounds. In most cases, even with the questions you will be receiving in the process of your research, tailor your arguments more and more to be able to benefit you in the process. Yeah. So that is it from me. Does anyone have any questions? Any questions? Okay, so can you explain more about international customs as a source of law? Okay, yes, so let me discuss about it generally, as you will be applying it in the moot competition, yeah? Because remember, you cannot go listing how every single country is maybe applying 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 the customary law. So yeah, to establish the customary or the international custom here, you will need to discuss the state practice. So even that forms part of the limbs of the argument you're making. So you need to discuss the state practice. And that's what I was talking about. You might need to um, refer to court cases in various jurisdictions. Yeah. And I remember being advised, for example, um, 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 since you cannot go mentioning every single country and what they are doing in the process of establishing international custom, you can rather pick a country in every continent or every region, yeah, and establish what the countries are doing. So also creating the diversity on the same, yeah. So that's like a practical way you can verbally submit on, or even in writing submit on state practice. But you also need to establish the opinion hoodies, um, and also in state practice. Yeah, remember state practice not only relies on court cases. There is I'm forgetting the name of the document. There was a document that outlines what amounts to state practice. Yeah, sometimes you might need to even quote the legislations that have been made by various states on the national level. Sometimes you might need to quote the orders or the decisions made by ministries in various jurisdictions. So it depends with what you need to establish the state practice at the moment. It's not necessarily always cases, but make sure that in the process you have satisfied both elements. You cannot satisfy only one element and proceed, because a judge might point that out. You haven't sufficiently established the international custom you're trying to argue. Make sure you argue both on the opinion juris and the state practice. I hope that answers your question, Sherit. Okay, so Tiwalade asks, did you say that you should reach out to Michael Pyle for Oxford? I'm sorry. Okay, so when you register for the competition and pay the fees, yeah. Okay, nice to it. When you register for the competition and pay the fees, you're given free access to all these research engines. So the Oxford, Hein, Who's, and LexisNexis. Yeah. So what I'm advising you is, in case you don't receive it after your registration, you have to follow up with Michael, because you have to get it immediately after you register for the competition. Okay. Any other question? Okay. I hope you've understood that anyways. Um, um, Jessup can be a hard competition. That's true. Everyone who talks about it talks about how one day they even had their breaking point at some point. But it's also a really engaging competition, and you will have a lot of fun researching into it, because the topics are new, the topics are very engaging, and if you research enough, you'll be able to even interact with what is it called, with modern cases, or recent cases or recent scenarios that might even contribute to your argument. So hopefully you will be registering for the competition. So register for the competition, get the compromise, read through it, structure your arguments, and start researching. But as I said, first make sure you have the basics of public international law on your fingertips, as whether you like it or not, it will be the guiding block of every single argument you'll be making on whatever area of law you're arguing at the moment. Yeah. Okay, so in the next okay, is another question. Are there national competitions for Jessup, also in public international law? The national competitions, none, the national competition for Jessup is currently in the US. Yeah. I've forgotten the full name, the HLI mode. Yeah. So, but national competitions, I think they are different for every country. Yeah. For example, for Kenya, you know, those who participate in the Kenya model of United Nations get to interact with a public international law mode. But yeah, every other mode that handles international law to some extent, if they have national grounds to interact with PIL. So I don't know what is the situation in Ethiopia, but I know under Jessup or under ILSA, they only facilitate one more competition in the US, which is a national competition. Okay, so in 2 minutes, Jeffrey Robbins will be joining us. Yeah, as I said, he's a judge. He's a judge who has judged the Jessup moot competition for a very long time, and will be responding to some of the questions you sent me on what a judge expects, both in the written rounds of the competition and the oral rounds of the competition. And afterwards, I will do a brief run through on how to navigate the resources of ILSA. I know it's a simple thing, but sometimes it's the simplest thing that students miss, and what differentiates between the winning team and the second team or the other team. Yeah. So let's wait for him, and then when he comes, we can start, and then now I'll finish with my session afterwards. If you have any other question in the process, you can type in the chat box, and I will respond to it. Okay, and he's here. Thank you so much, Mr. Jeffrey, for joining us today. So, as I've already introduced you, so Mr. Jeffrey Robbins is a judge with the Jessup competition, and he will be telling us how long he has judged. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's really wonderful to be with all of you today. And I'm glad I get to do stuff like this. So I have been judging the Jessup Moot Court for now over 20 years. So I competed in 2003 and 2004 here in the United States in regional rounds, and I never had the opportunity to go to international rounds. But because they happen near where I live, at the capital of the U.S. in Washington D.C., I get to go every year and help judge. But that's not all I've judged. I've judged our U.S. regional rounds, and I've had the chance to travel a bit internationally and help out judging both regional and other rounds in Tbilisi, Warsaw, Milan, Warsaw again, and I think that's it so far. So maybe I'll get the opportunity to come judge you all one day back home before you come to Washington. I would look forward to that. Um, so, Lorraine, you gave me a couple of questions. Do you want me to kind of walk through those generally? And what I would say is if people have follow-ups, feel free to raise a hand. And I just want to confirm we have a whole hour for this.
We have 30 minutes.
30 minutes. Perfect.
Yes.
I don't have to stretch it out then. Um, and it helps me to be brief, which is probably one of my pieces of advice to you all as well, to find your point and be able to get to it um, for oral arguments. But we're going to start with memorial writing because that is, as you get into the problem, now that it's been released, and that is the first thing that you are all turning to. Okay, so question number one that I have from your collective group: what is the perspective towards extra formatting of memorials beyond what the Jessup rules dictate? Um, I I'll be honest, in judging, I don't assess rule penalties, so I have not gone through the letter and verse of the rules in very recent memory. But um, I've seen memorials that have cover pages with lots on them, beyond what you would see in a regular type pleading or memorial. I don't think that's a good idea. And in terms of formatting, I very much like the use of point headers, right? So when you, before each section or before each paragraph, you're able to tell where you're going and include that in your table of contents. That is really good for formatting. Um, if there are kind of more specific questions of what you were thinking of specific formatting, my basic recommendation is to keep it simple, and any formatting choice you make should make it easier for the reader, in this case the judge, to follow along, to know where you've been, to know where you're going, and to know what you're going to be talking about next. So the next question I have is key mistakes that I notice students making in memorials and how to avoid it. Um, there's all kinds of things that happen. I think the most important thing, and the most, not the most prevalent, but a clear mistake that happens, is having typos, typographical errors, formatting errors, and things that generally can be avoided by completing your work early enough to allow you and your teammates and your coaches sufficient time to review what you are submitting. That shows, both in Jessup and in the real world, it helps a judge say, well, this person, this team, they have, credibility. They put the time, they put the effort into this, and make someone less likely to think that there's other mistakes that aren't maybe typos or formatting hiding within the memorial that they might want to look more closely for. So the biggest way that you can kind of go wrong in that area is not giving yourself sufficient time to do that review. Another mistake that I see with some regularity, and this relates to the next question I have in terms of referencing or citation style, is make sure if you have a legal proposition or you have a fact that is not your own opinion or your own analysis, that you're providing a citation to it. So that's the first part of it. So when you see every sentence that builds what your legal rule is or gives an example of how that rule is applied should have a citation. The thing to be careful about if you're in a certain section is having perhaps the same citation again and again and again and again. Resources we recognize can be limited in terms of what people have access to, but your goal should be to provide an array of sources that not only support the point that you're making, but that provide examples of kind of how that rule has been applied, whether it be by other tribunals, arbitral bodies, and things of that sort. And that's how you kind of get from the here is here's a basic treatise, right? Here is Ian Brownlee on international law to, well, I'm going to cite to Ian Brownlee. I'm going to cite to maybe another publicist. I'm going to cite to the ICJ case that they're citing to, and then maybe I'm also going to, provide citation to an arbitral decision or a domestic court decision that talks about that principle or that case. So there's nothing wrong with having what I would refer to as a string cite. The other thing I think students can do and use more effectively now that the Jessup rules allow them is to use parentheticals. So you don't always have to explain specifically why you're citing to something in the text, but it's really helpful in the parenthetical if you have space and if you have the time to be able to explain why that source is important to the sentence it is attached to. The facts, the factual statement in your compromise is not a throwaway. It should not be cut and pasted or selected references from the compromise or problem itself. You should write your version of the story in a way that is factual, but also highlights those facts that are more persuasive for your side of the argument. But the way you can avoid going wrong is by always including citation to the provisions and the paragraphs that you are citing, both in oral rounds and in the written memorials, especially as teams advance to higher levels. Judges notice when you say or write things that aren't in the problem and that maybe are stretching the truth or might actually be false. So the two primary ways to avoid this are, first, to make sure that you are citing to a provision of the compromise or problem for each of those assertions. And two, and making sure you get it right after, especially in oral rounds, after you've gone round after round of practice and after you've spent months working on your memorials, it could happen that you think that the compromise or the problem says something, but the language might be a little different. So always, don't trust yourself. Don't trust your teammates all the time either. Look back and read it, and read it and reread it again and again, because as you develop your understanding of everything, it also might help you say, oh, well, that comma is really important. That word is really important. I didn't think that mattered before, but now that I'm kind of, expanding my understanding of my arguments, that's actually something I can use, or maybe it's something that can hurt me. Um, but the bottom line for the memorial writing is make sure that your citations are there and that your factual discussion is accurate. Don't brush over the factual discussion either as you apply the legal rule that you're establishing with the conclusion that you're making. So it's too easy to say, right, the Genocide Convention says that these things are wrong and people shouldn't do them, therefore we win. But what you're missing is the facts that apply to that law that support that really apply your argument and show why, as a result of X, Y, or Z convention and the facts that happened in this case, your party should prevail on this point, right? So that's you've all probably heard of IRAC or similar principles: issue, rule, analysis, and conclusion. And so make sure for all of your arguments that you have each of those elements in your discussion. The thing that is most often lacking in memorials that don't do as well is they are missing analysis, I find, or the analysis is too conclusory. And that kind of throws out those memorials where teams didn't have the interest or the time, and things have gone wrong clearly in some memorials sometimes, unfortunately. But where there is the time and the effort, make sure that you're including that analysis and a conclusion as well. Don't leave me hanging at the end of a paragraph. Let us know what your conclusion is and what relief you want. Referencing style, most preferred for the Jessup. There are so many different ways to do it and so many different legal traditions. The bottom line, I would say, is make sure I can tell what you're citing, make sure that you're citing it consistently, and make sure that the details are in there. So if it's page numbers, if it's a quote that's not in the body or a parenthetical to explain it, I think that's really helpful. I come from using the Blue Book, and so when I see the Blue Book, I'm most comfortable. But honestly, as long as I can tell what you're citing to, that's usually good. I think the thing to be most careful about, especially as we all fight to save space in our written work, is using an abbreviation for a cite or a treaty that maybe two things. It might not be conventional, right? It might be one that you and your team have come up with, which is technically correct, a way to cite things. But if I'm on page 30 of your memorial, I may not look back at page 1 or 2 or 5 to understand how you defined that citation. So sometimes repeating the title of something or using some abbreviation without it being a 4-letter acronym that no one actually uses is helpful. The other thing is, don't assume just because the international law community or certain portions of it use an acronym to refer to a treaty that every judge reading the memorial knows that UNTOC is the right United Nations Convention on Transnational Organized Crime or something like that. Like, even if it is a norm, and if you have the space, it might be more beneficial to spell it out in multiple instances, or at least in each section of your memorial. That way it's easier for the judges to know what you're citing back to if they're not familiar with it. So we're about at the halfway point. We've talked about memorials briefly. Should we stop for a couple of minutes and see if there's any memorial questions or thoughts or comments from the group?
Yeah, if you have any question, raise your hand or type it in the chat box. I can see Tonmai has asked, is it possible to get the previous year's Jessup moot memorials for both the applicant and the respondent? That one I can answer. The answer is yes. It's on the website, and I'll be guiding you on the same after this. So yeah.
Excellent.
So if you have any, yes, if you have any question, this is your time.
Okay.
Yeah, and if there is none, we can proceed. Oh, there's one
What
from
do judges?
Chris. Yeah.
So what do judges look for in grading memorials? So there's a rubric that we use. Those score sheets, the rubric that we use, I believe, is also available to competitors. So it essentially lays out 5 categories, and I'm going to give them to you off the top of my head. But one is organization and clarity. One is citation and sources, and then you kind of have your key ones. So it's knowledge of the law, your legal analysis, and I think knowledge of the facts. So that they're not exactly presented that way, but those are the key things that we're looking for. And it is most heavily weighted to knowledge of the law and application of the law. So the other stuff is smaller, and can play an important role in terms of whether you're getting in the 70s or 80s or even the 80s and 90s if there are problems. But it really is showing that knowledge of the law and then how you apply it to the problem and not misrepresenting the facts of the problem or compromise that are key. All right, so turning into the back half of today's presentation, oral rounds, which is my favorite part of the Jessup and working as a litigator in real life. I love getting up in court. I like doing it as a judge, a fake judge at Jessup, and I like doing it as an advocate as part of my profession. So what makes a good first impression with the judge in a moot? Listening, eye contact, speaking slowly and clearly, and answering the judge's questions. So that shows, right, that you're listening, that you're engaged, and that you're working to kind of apply your knowledge to the questions that you're getting. The mistakes, kind of the other side of that question here, what mistakes throw off a judge in the oral rounds? Reading. Reading your notes generally will throw off the judges. We want to see you engaged. Our goal as part A is part of this learning exercise, but B, to be able to kind of assess your knowledge, is to take you off your memorial, take you a step away from your written script, and kind of be able to propose hypotheticals to you, to maybe indicate that we don't agree with something, and we want you to see if there's another argument you have that supports your point. So being as comfortable and as flexible as you can be with the variety of arguments that you have available to you, while having a clear and strong presentation in the first place is really the best way you can go. What I would say is you should, it might be okay to start with kind of a written script, but I really recommend starting with a very detailed outline. And each time you practice, you have your binder, you have your materials, and your outline. Each time you argue might get smaller and shorter and shorter and shorter until at the end, right, you might only have a couple of things, knowing that you have everything else you need there if you need to answer a question, look at a case. If your mind goes blank and you forget what you were going to say next, you can flip to the page and say, oh, well, here's what I've been saying next for the last 2 months now. That'll all be in there. So that's my recommended method of preparation, is starting longer and then relying on that outline less and less and more kind of what feels comfortable in your head. Which then gets to our next question. I'm really nervous about the questions. Is there a way to handle them? And questions are very nerve-wracking. Very often they take you off your track. Linguistically, they can be challenging just in terms of where judges are from and where competitors are from generally, just making sure that you even understand the question. So here's my advice, right, when handling any question. First, make sure you've heard the question. Second, and related, make sure you understand the question. It is okay to say, I'm sorry, I missed that, Your Excellency. Can you please repeat it? Now, if you were wandering off into space, that might hurt you a little, but better to know what the question is than answer something that you have no idea what it was. The same goes for kind of your understanding and comprehension of what the judge is saying or what the judge is getting at. Some judges will ask long-winded questions. Some judges will say things that actually don't sound like a question and then kind of put out their hand and expect you to answer. So the best way you can be prepared for any of that and that variety of things is to practice, 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 practice. Practice with coaches, practice with your teammates, asking bad questions, asking questions that get the facts wrong, asking questions that get the law wrong. All those sorts of things are the best way to be prepared for questions generally. The next thing is kind of in responding to a question, you want to answer the question as directly and succinctly as possible. So if you can say yes, or you can say no, and that answers the question. If you could say blue, if you could say 43, you've answered the question. You've taken not even a second to do that. And hopefully you're able to kind of transition back, get back to where you are, or take the question as an opportunity to move on to your next point. You should never brush over a question, or ideally, you should not be putting off a question to later. If the question relates to something later in your argument, answer it then, and then say, and, in a short while, I'm going to discuss more of this, and I look forward to the court's additional questions then. The last thing on questions here is in preparing for the oral round, and Chief Justice Roberts, the person who's in charge of the Supreme Court of the United States right now, who came up through the Court of Appeals, but before that, he was just a regular lawyer. Maybe not a regular lawyer, he was pretty smart. But he talks about what he would do to get ready for oral argument. And I'll admit, I've never done it quite to this extent, but I think it's a very effective tool for the Jessup. And that is for you and your teammates and your coaches to write down, every night, 5 questions or 10 questions on index cards or slips of paper. And this way you come up with a whole stack of questions. And one of the challenges in Jessup or in any oral argument is getting a question that's kind of getting 2 questions that are unrelated to each other and figuring out how you're going to sound smooth and smart, trying to answer all of these things. And so what he would do is he would shuffle up all of these questions like a deck of cards, and he'd pull them out one at a time, and he would answer the question, or if he didn't know the answer, right, he would research it or talk with his team, figure out what the answer is, and then go to the next question. And it's a challenge both in answering each question, which could be looking for a very deep, involved answer, some of which might only be looking for, yes, that is what the compromise says. Those are the facts of this case. And that's how this helps us. Or that fact doesn't hurt us because of X, Y, and Z. But then going to the next question, which might ask about something totally different and figuring out, well, how do I get from question A to question B? What is my transition? What is my segue to get there? And so there's a lot of work that goes into preparing that, but you get a twofold benefit. The first is you kind of have a catalog of all the questions you're getting and the answers that you want to come up with. And then you're starting to figure out, how can I maneuver from one question to another, especially if that's not what my outline looks like at all. And so that's a way that you can also practice getting away from your written speech, if you've written one, or your outline, because all of a sudden you're just answering questions and you're like, oh, that's in this part of my outline at the top of the page. And I remember that's in on the third page of my outline in the bottom left-hand corner. I know that's where it is. And maybe you look back for those references, but you're not beholden to the order of your outline. It's kind of getting you out of your comfort zone, which is hard, but that's a good way to do that. Attitude towards referring to notes or other counsel when submitting a round, so during the oral argument. So the rules are very, very clear that you cannot talk to anyone during your, well, really at any point. The second part of it is no notes can be passed from anywhere else in the room. It would only be at counsel's table. So those are like the two main takeaways. So it's okay to receive notes from your teammates. I would be cautious about doing that. And really, it depends on your personalities and how everything else works. I know that while I appreciate getting kind of a note from the bench, it could be very disruptive to kind of the argument I'm making. So, you all kind of need to have your plan and understanding about, limiting the number of notes that you might send, because you also don't want the bench to be like, oh, they really don't have their act together. They keep getting all these notes. They can't do it on their own. I don't know that would be the case, but my main idea on answering this question is notes are great if you've said something wrong and it needs to be corrected as quickly as possible. Right? And you want to be calm about it. You want to write it down, pass it over. You don't want to be like, oh no, this is horrible, and run, pass it up to them. You want to never let them see you sweat. And then the next part would be if you don't know the answer to a question and you kind of skip over it, and you think it could be really helpful to kind of clean it up right then and there. A note might be a helpful way to do that also. The other thing is your co-agent can come up in their argument and say, Mr. President had a question about this. We want to be clear. This is the answer, and here's how it relates, to our case, why it helps us win, why it doesn't hurt us, why it's neutral. And with a minute left, and wanting to be respectful of your time, advice about common pitfalls in courtroom etiquette and interaction with judges. Don't talk over a judge when they're asking a question, even if they won't shut up. It's not great sometimes if you get a talkative judge. But if you answer your questions in a short way, right, you are encouraging conversation and you're encouraging more short questions. So rather than I'm talking for a paragraph, you're talking for 2 paragraphs, it's sentence, 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 sentence. And that's a great rhythm to try to achieve in a round. And again, that's in my opinion, right? Different judges may also have different opinions, but I think I've seen a lot of them over the years. The other common pitfall, I would just reiterate, is not answering the questions, or as I said earlier, being loose, making too many inferences that aren't based in reality on the facts of the problem. If something is not in the compromise, admit that it's not there, and then explain why your inference is reasonable. Don't just say something assuming that everyone should accept it. You want to show that there's a gap, but this is an appropriate way to resolve it. So I can hang around for a couple of minutes if there are questions, or if you all want to pass along questions to me after this, I'm happy to receive them from Lorraine by email.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Jeffrey, for joining us today. I think everyone needed to hear that from a judge, so that hopefully the it's more persuasive when it comes from you. So I really appreciate that you joined us today, and hopefully I'll see you once again. Any questions from the team? Any questions?
All right. Well, for those of you who make it to DC, and hopefully that's a good trip, come find me. I'll be there at the end of the week of the international round. So I expect I'll still have the beard and look the same, but if not, just look for the short bald guy. All right.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Good luck. Have fun.
Okay, so we'll proceed. I hope that was beneficial for those who asked the questions. I hope you are sufficiently responded to. Yeah. So we are now heading towards we're almost heading towards the end of our session. But for one thing, yeah, as I said, we are going to discuss about the ILS resources. So I'll be sharing my screen in just a minute. So confirm you can see my screen. Okay, amazing. Yeah. So I'll need my checklist to make sure I'm exhaustive. Yeah. So number one, I'll start with how you can participate in the Jessup. Yeah. So number one, you can participate as a team member, as a competitor. Yeah. So there are those who have strong oratory skills or want to practice the oratory skills. This is your time to shine. But if your strength is on the research side, remember a team can be of 2 to 5 participants. So it's good to work with your strength. Yeah. So when you register, you can register here as a competitor, and you'll be able to get more information on the Jessup competition as a competitor. Yeah, so on the competition portal, you can see all these details here. So your registration or your logins, the case problem, which is already out. Currently, Jessup is is accepting corrections and clarifications on the Jessup question. So if you have any questions or clarification on the fact sheet, you can submit it with this document. There's instructions on the official schedule. So that is the whole timetable that is also down here, detailing the various dates all the way till April 4th when you'll be having the final rounds of the competition. The basic materials which is yet to be sent, the instruction on the registration fees, and all this. Yeah, the rules are also here. So everything you need for the competition as a student is here in the competition portal. Most of us now, such as Jeffrey and other people you'll be meeting, participate as judges. Yeah, so in the judges portal, that's where judges, please as a student, do not register as a judge. Remember that this is also a network of international law practitioners you'll be interacting with. You do not need to create a bad name. So remember, don't register as a student for the Jessup judge. But in the Jessup judge portal, let me find it. Here. Someone asked a question on what is considered while grading the memorials. So here you can get all these guidelines. There is the preliminary rounds oral score sheet, the advanced round oral score sheet, sample oral round questions from the previous years and the judging checklist and the memorial judging guide. So all these are here. If you need documents on the perspective of the judge, this is your portal, yeah, which I think you should also all take a look at it. I believe I also have lecturers and coaches in the meeting today, so you will need to look at those documents and see what is the structure, yeah. It's also good for planning. So as I had mentioned, I'm the administrator of the Kenya National Rounds of the competition. So this is my portal here where I get to register and all that. Yeah. So information about the Jessup competition is here, as you can see. So what is it? That is the general information, but what you need is here, the Jessup 2026. So for the general information about the competition, you'll have it here. I had mentioned that some of the countries might have supplementary rules of the competition. And if you've participated in the Jessup competition previously, kindly note that there is changes to the rules of the competition. So make sure you go through it here. But some countries and regions have rules supplement to the main rules. So if your country has supplements, make sure you look into them. And Jessup also provides the list of approved acronyms. So this is where you find it. But if you've subscribed to the website, you'll be able to access all those information from there. Yeah. Also within this website, as I've said, I've already talked about all this. Yeah. So here the white and case international rounds. Usually when the international rounds are going on, this is the portal where you get information on which team has proceeded to the round of 48, the round of 16, the quarterfinals, the semifinals. So all these instructions are usually here. And for those who proceed to the international rounds, there's also all this information here about Washington, but that is hopefully when you proceed to the international rounds. Yeah. Yeah, so that is majorly it on accessing the resources for registering and preparing for the competition. Someone asked about I'm on the right place. Someone asked about the where to access the previous memorials of the competition. I've sort of lost it. Oh, yes, yeah. So under Jessup here, the Jessup history, yeah, you'll be able to access the oral rounds, as I told you, especially since the COVID-19 era. Jessup has been keeping videos of the oral rounds of the competition. So when you click here, it will take you to the YouTube page and you'll be able to have a feel on what is expected of you while preparing for the oral rounds. But as I told you, a lot of research is needed. So don't wait to start preparing for the oral rounds to watch the videos. You can watch them as soon as tomorrow to get a feel of what is expected in the oral rounds of the competition. Yeah. And the previous questions all the way since Jessup started. Yeah. They have the question, they have the memorials. So you can also look at them to even have a feel of the format of the though a bit of the format has also changed this year, so be wary of the same. Yeah, to get a feel of the format and also the structure of the document, especially if this is new to you. So all these resources are also available to you via here. Yeah. So yeah, I think that is it, especially when you're preparing for the competition. But there are also other opportunities within the whole International Law Students Association. Remember, International Law Students Association, that is ILSA, is the body governing the administering the Jessup competition. So here you can see the Student Dick Award, which awards the best international article for in a student edited law journal. I believe most of us, I believe there's so many student edited journals that are coming up in Africa. A lot of university students are taking part in the same. So there is always applications usually start at the beginning of the year, usually, yeah, at the beginning of the year of the competition. So if you're a researcher, you have a paper, look out for the same, and you never know, you might get an award. Yeah. The other thing is the International Refugee Law Student Writing Competition. This is the deadline is usually in February. Yeah, the deadline is usually in February. So if you're interested in refugee law, actually my specialty in practice now is refugee law. You can research and write a paper, and the instructions are all here. So the deadline is usually, for example, for now, the next deadline is next year on February. Yeah. So when it's out, they also release an announcement for the same, and you can get to submit your document. Yeah. Another opportunity with ILSAP, which I'm encouraging more of us to apply, is the student director position. I had shared that I was a student director in the year 2024 to 2025. You met two of our student directors. We have Tarazi, we have Gabriela, and we also have Swan Fong. Yeah, who wasn't able to join us for this session. But if you go to Washington, D.C., you'll be able to meet him too. Yeah, so it is a really interactive position, especially for a student. And if you have experience in the Jessup, you have a competitive what is it called? Is it bargaining power? Yeah, you increase your chances of being selected as a student director in the competition. So you might wonder, what do you do as a student director? Generally, you are the ambassadors of your fellow students to the board. So you get to raise the issues that the students face to the board. You get to participate, so you get to see how the question is drafted, how the moot competition is directed. For those who are interested, how the whole organization is done, how the funding is done, you get to participate in a lot of conferences, and you generally also the ambassadors of ILSA to every other student. It is, I did enjoy it during my year, and sadly, I was part of the selecting committee of 2025-2026, and I noted there were few students from Asia and Africa. So hopefully next year, because I believe most of you will be participating in the competition, take an opportunity and apply. The applications usually start towards the end of the year or at the beginning of the next year. So that's when you're encouraged to send your application for the same. Try, and you may never know your luck. You may be eligible to be a student director. So the instructions are all here. You can also get the instructions of your current student directors here. Yeah, so that is it. The other resources, is there anything else I've forgotten? Yeah. Yeah, I think I have covered everything. Yeah. So most of us might not be constantly checking the website day and night, waiting for updates on the same. But ILSA has a mailing list. But usually when you register for the competition, you're added to the mailing list of the competition automatically. Yeah. But if you haven't registered, there is a mailing list, and you can get constant information on what is happening, not only in Jessup, but also in ILSA. Yeah. For example, recently they are mobilizing for interested judges who would like to judge the states on competition. I believe most of you are aware of the environmental note. And there's a lot of networking opportunities, a lot of mostly networking opportunities that you can get, and even scholarship and master's opportunities that you can get through the communications and the mailing list. Yeah. If you prefer the social media website, I believe there's Twitter, there's Facebook, and there's Instagram, in case that is your preferred means of getting updates on ILSA or updates on Jessup. Because every time they get new resources, they share it with all the students, and if applicable, also the alumni or the friends of the Jessup competition. So I hope that gives you the guidance on what exists on the website. Take advantage of the resources that are here. You never know what might benefit you more. Yeah. And as I said, remember the contacts for ILSA are also available. I believe what's his name? Michael shared it with you. So Jessup at ilsa.org. So if you have any questions on Jessup, always ask. I showed you the section for the administrators, so you can always also speak to your national administrator, especially on issues affecting the national rounds of the competition. Additionally, especially if you're interested in learning about the Jessup competition in the future rounds. So this is usually what most administrators do. So I cannot confirm that it is common for every single national round of the competition. So if you're interested, you can volunteer to be a bailiff of the competition if you want to get a feel of what happens in the national rounds of the competition. Yeah, you can volunteer to be a bailiff, because just as a student, you might be restricted from entering the court session, but as a bailiff, you'll be at the front line and you'll get to see how the other students are voting during the competition. So if that is how you'd like your learning experience to be, you can volunteer through your national administrator. Yeah, I'm also speaking this in my benefit with hopes that I'll see some of you coming to volunteer during the national rounds of the Jessup competition. Yeah, so once you're done in the future, if you'd like to be a judge, you can always apply to be one via the website. If you'd like to be a coach, yeah, you can coach your school team or any other school team, yeah. If you would like to be a remote coach, yeah, Jessup also allows you to apply to be a remote coach of the competition. I believe those who are here on the first day had Max talking about how he had a remote coach from Leiden University who was able to help them throughout the competition. Yeah, and vice versa. If you are a team and especially you feel like you don't have enough resources, or you would like an extra judge of the competition, or you just need a judge, send an email as soon as possible, because remember the opportunities are also on a first come, first serve basis, and also the number of coaches that will apply to assist remotely. Yes, so I think I have covered everything on the resources for the Jessup competition. Yeah. I'll insist also that make sure you read the rules of the competition, as you never know what might benefit you in the process. So read the rules. Anyways, anyone with questions before I conclude? Okay, so I would like to thank every single person for joining the session. It wouldn't have been practical if you hadn't joined the session, especially for those who have joined for all the 3 days. Thank you for being here. Some of you have raised the issue about the time differences across various countries, and I know it will be hard to harmonize something that works for everyone, but um, hopefully next year we'll be able to have a more structured and multiple information sessions that will be able to cater for different regions, respective of the timelines in your country. But thank you so much for joining the session. The hosting account for the Zoom meeting is the ILSA account. So Michael should be the one having access to the recordings. Sadly, I'm not very tech savvy, but I've been recording the meeting, the last 2 days of the meeting. So I will be sharing with you the recordings of the last 2 days, and also the resources of the last 2 days. Yeah, so this has been fun. I'm also glad that this has ended. I really, really hope to see a majority of you registering for the competition. Remember, it's a learning experience. Remember, if you have any challenge, Michael has also spoken that if you have financial challenges registering for the competition, consulting. There's a lot of international practitioner networks that exist around the Jessup, and it is not guaranteed, but you can never know when there might be someone somewhere willing to support you as you participate in the competition. So I look forward to seeing more of you registering and participating, and hopefully I'll get to see some of you next year in Washington, D.C. So it's currently evening, as you can see from the lighting in my country. So have a good evening, have a good day. If you have any questions, you can direct it to my email, and all the best as you continue your legal studies.
Recording stopped.